Well, what, excuse me, is going on YouTube? Welcome back to Therapeutic Edge. Hey, do me a favor and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And don't forget to hit that like button down there. On the table in front of us is a knife that I have reviewed. Okay, not this exact one, but I have a previous review on this. This, of course, is the Grimsmo Norseman. And I reviewed this knife a while back, and I didn't like it very much. And I think my primary problem with it is how difficult they are to get and how expensive they are. These are, $950 through $1,100, depending on where you find them and how much you can get one, if you can even get one. That is just a shitload of money for a knife. There's no question. And I compared this against the ZT-0920, which is also a recurve blade with unique styling and all sorts of stuff. And then I sort of put it out of my mind. At least I thought I did. So in the time between then and now, I had been to the California Custom Knife Show, and I've been to some other knife shows, and I've seen a whole bunch of really expensive custom knives and really expensive other knives. And a funny thing started happening. So I had the one that I got from Dirk Warning for about a week, 2 weeks. And I carried it. He asked me to, and I used it. He asked me to. And then I started, like I said, I thought I put it out of my mind, except that when I was confronted with other really expensive knives, I found myself comparing them to the Norseman, if only in my head, because I didn't have one anymore. And I don't do that usually. If I don't like a knife, it tends not to stick with me. I just move along. I don't spend time on stuff that I don't enjoy. And so while that was going on, I had the opportunity to hold another Norseman and a Rask and some other stuff. And I just realized that if I got the opportunity, I would like to give this sort of ridiculously absurd knife another shot. And so, like I said, I held a couple of others that belonged to other people. And then when this one came up for trade, I jumped on it. And so this is not really a review. I'm going to review this particular example, but this is mostly a discussion about how our tastes, can change, and about how we learn things as we go along. Now, I have other expensive knives, not quite this level. I mean, I had a Direware that I eventually got rid of. I didn't really enjoy it that much. But I have, things that are in the $400 to $500 range, like the Chris Reeve Unumzon here, right? I have knives that are $600 to $700, like the XM24 and the Strider SMF. These are expensive. There's just no question, right? These are very expensive knives. I've got custom stuff like the Curtis Warhawk here. You saw a review on this, I think, last week. This is about, let's call it $600. It makes no difference. All of these are too expensive. Even the custom stuff, but not absurdly so. And then we come back to the Grimsmo. Now, does it do anything $400, $300 or $400 better than the rest of these? No. I mean, sort of. And that's the complex part. Let's compare it against a $200 knife and a $40, $50 knife. So let's see, what do we have on the table? Okay. This is the Kuby 322. It is a great knife. Costs about $50. It's D2, steel liners, very comfortable in hand. Does everything. In fact, some things better than the Norseman because of the funny shaped blade, but it doesn't feel the same. Moving up a little bit, this is a $200 This is a classic at this point. There's a review of this coming as well. This is the Kaser Matador. It's a Nick Swan design from about 4 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago now. This is a fantastic pocket knife, about $200. Again, superb, but it's just different somehow. So let's take a look at what you do get in the Grimsmo Norseman and why I think it eventually came back and sort of bit me and ended up getting another one. First, there is nothing else that looks like it on the planet, right? There are lots of things that look like this. There are lots of things that look like this. There just are. Even some of my more unique knives that cost a lot less money, stuff like the GPB1 by Kaser, which is a truly unique knife. I mean, truly. Still doesn't really push the envelope that hard. This, by the way, is a fantastic pocket knife. The Norseman is completely unapologetic. The recurve Tanto blade, which, by the way, I've heard somebody refer to as a horse penis, and I'm not going to argue with that, is entirely its own thing. The scales are very lean and very thin. They are not milled, but they are still very light. All of the hardware is titanium. The blade is RWL34, which is not a super steel in today's market by any stretch of the imagination, but it does hold a wicked edge. So what is it about this knife that made me compare it against, $1,000, $1,500 customs at places like the California Custom Knife Show? It is the complete package. It is very comfortable to hold this knife. The very strange blade shape, once you get used to the recurve, does a phenomenal job cutting. The tip is very robust, and there is enough pokey up here. You can poke this into materials if you're trying to. It's not a, well, it's not a stabbing tip like this one, but it definitely doesn't interfere with use. Everything on this knife is exactly the way Grimsmo wants it to be. I'm not sure this is going to show up. By the way, there are fakes of these out there made in things like, they say M390 and all sorts of other stuff. One of the ways to tell if you have a real one or not is, first, does it have these lines in the blade, these milling lines in the blade? These are part of their production process. They are supposed to be there. Second, let's get that up nice and close. Do you see the little holes in the titanium body screws around? These are T8 or T9. Those are, well, those need to be there. If you have a Norseman and the screws are plain and the blade is something other than RWL34 and a couple other choices, be careful. And I hate that. I hate that there are clones of this thing out there running around, taking advantage of people who might be trying to spend their incredibly hard-earned money on a very expensive knife only to get burned. So before you buy one of these or trade for one of these or buy one brand new or whatever, if you buy one brand new, you're probably safe, but just be careful. The milling on the titanium is perfect and adds just enough grip as to be comfortable without being aggressive. There is very little jimping on the flipper, as you can see, just 2 lines, but it is more than enough. The blade flies out every time. The detent on this one is not that stiff. You can move it without it shaking out, but it will shake out. The closing action on this thing is a flippin' guillotine. You will take a finger off if you're not careful. And yet I love this knife now. I do. You guys know I'm not a huge bronze fan, and yet the pops of color from the hardware on this, just enough to make it interesting. Single-sided thumb stud is traditional, and again, it has those milling holes on the backside of the stud, the screw that holds in the stud. Although they do make thumb studs that go on both sides if you wanted one. in the end, well, let's finish the basic fundamental look at this, shall we? You get 3 and just shy of 3.5 inches of cutting. Excuse me, a little over 3.25 inches of cutting on 3.75 inches of RWL34. The grip area from behind the flipper tab is 1, 2, 3, 4 1/4. It is plenty of room. It is very nice. The knife overall is 8.5 inches. Closed profile is very nice, although a little tall. With that flipper tab, you're looking at about an inch and a half, right? Closed length, just at 5 inches. It is very lean. It is at its thickest point. It is just over 1/4 inch. It is very lean. I cannot in any sensible way recommend that you rush out and get one of these. They're just too expensive. But if you want one, and you might, they are truly unique in the knife world, except for the clones that I mentioned. Find one. At least find one that you can hold. Don't buy one of these unless you get a chance to play with it. Because, well, actually, you know what? If you buy one of these for $900 or $1,000 and you don't like it, you will get $900 or $1,000 for it. They hold their value. That's part of the problem with small batch. It's one of my complaints about stuff like this. This knife was about $600 new, and it sells for more than that on the secondary market because Strider and some other companies produce stuff in small enough numbers that they keep the interest way up without flooding the market. So if you buy one and you don't like it, you're not stuck with it, which is a nice feature. Many knives, if you spend, $220 on a Kaser, you're going to get $170 maybe out of it later, depending on the condition. Stuff like this, and like this, and like this, and like this, that will not be the case. Okay, so there's a little bit of a safety valve there. But like I said, there I was holding, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 fully handmade custom knives. And I kept thinking to myself, that doesn't feel quite as good as that Grimsmo I had. Or, man, that would not ride the pocket nearly as well as that Grimsmo that I had would. Or, it's just not as interesting looking as that Grimsmo. Stuff like that just stayed with me. So now I have one. I asked my audience at a recent live if I should make another video about this, and most of the people said yes. Some people were like, screw that thing, and I don't blame you. If you don't like this sort of knife, and you don't have to. I recognize that it is sort of absurd, and yet, as a collector, eventually you get knives that maybe didn't make sense to you in the beginning. This is 100% true. I mean, there was a time when I had 50 knives that were just like this. D2 or 8CR13 MOV, G10 or FRN, steel liners, and I was completely happy. Then stuff like this, right? This is that 2017, 2018 generation of Kaser came along, stuff like this, that sort of started to change the way I felt about materials and what I would ask from a knife. It also changed how much money I thought was reasonable to spend on a knife. But even then, the idea of having a $600 or $700, $800, $1,000 knife was completely absurd to me. And it still sort of is. But here we are. So this is the Grimsmo Norseman. This one happens to be number 1136. It is RWL34, as I said. It is all titanium. It is running on ceramic bearings. It is the drop shuttiest knife ever. It is very light in the pocket. It's got a nice lanyard space if you're into that sort of thing. It is ridiculously expensive, and I am very happy to have it. And it will continue to be the knife that I compare other expensive knives to. By way of example, the Umnumzon is a phenomenal working tool. They come in about $450, which is half the price of the Norseman. But This is not a knife that I compare other knives to. This is just what it is. And why do I say that? Well, it is sort of rough around the edges. The action is, well, Chris Reeve, right? It's not snappy, really. It just is. And it's interesting. But when I pick up knives that cost $200, $300, $400, $500, $600, $700 now, and I close them, that's the action I'm thinking about. And when I open them, that's the action I'm thinking about. Smooth, graceful. So there we are. This is my Grimsmo Norseman. You don't have to have one if you don't want one. But if you do want one, well, I don't know that anything else will do. And that's up to you. Make that sort of choice on your own. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Grimsmo Norseman. Again, this is me, my mea culpa, admitting that I was wrong about it the first time around. But we live, we learn, and we grow. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this second look at the Grimsmo Norseman. I know I very much enjoy owning it. Thank you so much for your time today. We'll see you next time.